Hi there, welcome back. And so now it's the exciting time in our lives when we get to start thinking about creating and editing your charts for your poster. Woo! Now, as we start thinking about creating your charts, what you want to do is to think about what variable you want to chart. And then also think about whether that variable is continuous or categorical. And so continuous variables are variables that have an interval or ratio level, and they're usually represented by a whole range of numbers. For example, height in inches or weight in pounds or distance in miles, that kind of thing. And so continuous variables are quantitative variables that have a wide range of numbers. Categorical variables are often nominal level, which means that there may be categories associated with that variable, but they're not ordered or are naturally numeric. And so, for example, if I ask you about your car make and model, or your race or favorite sport, those may be classified into groups or categories, but they do not have a numeric ordering, for example. And so many of our demographic variables that we collected for our survey will have a categorical nature to them. So you might remember those yes or no type variables. Now, once you have a sense of what variable you want to graph, then you want to think about what exact data you want to graph for that variable. And then you would want to generate that data. And so some examples include frequency, so number of people per category, for each category, or percentage of or proportion of the sample that belongs to each category. Or maybe perhaps a mean for that variable, if you have a quantitative variable for which you can calculate a mean, or similarly, a sum score for a particular variable if you can calculate a sum that is meaningful. And once you're ready with that data, then you can go ahead and insert charts. And so you want to select the data that you want to graph, and I'll show you how to do that in Excel. And then click on the Insert tab, and then go to the Charts group and select the type of chart that you want to enter. So let's hop on over to Excel for a quick demo. You might want to have your own data set open so they can follow along and pause video as necessary to replicate what I'm doing in Excel. See you there. Alright, so welcome to Excel, and here you will see what is fake data, and so please do not take this as a representation of what your data should look like. This is fake data, and so just FYI. Now, it's a good idea when you get a data set to just look around, and so you will notice that the first row is basically data. And if you wanted to be able to scroll down and still see the header, then you can go to View and then Freeze Panes, Freeze Top Row, so that it just stays there. This is just a visual way to indicate to Excel that this should just stay constant because it's a header. And that will allow you to just kind of scroll down and take a look at your data. And you can see the types of numbers that exist in here. And most of these variables are 0 or 1, but you might notice that there are some empty cells, which means that's missing data. And so you will want to know that as well. Now it goes down to row 122. So how many cases are there, do you think? If you said 121, then way to go. So you will want to remember that the first row is just headings, and so technically there is 121 cases here. But I would encourage you to just kind of look around and get a sense of your data when you first get it. Now, as an example, let me see about graphing research. Now, research was a yes or no question about whether or not you were engaged in being in a research lab. And so I know that the options were yes or no. And I'm going to type out these notes so that it's easier for me to remember what I am calculating. So let's say that I wanted to figure out how many people said yes, which has a value of 1 for research. And then I will go, and you might remember count if, and then you will want to remember, or you can also point and click. So this starts at D2, and you can just kind of scroll down if you would prefer to use your mouse, or you can just type in this range, D2 to 122. And then I'm typing in the formula bar, but you can also type it in the cell as well. But if you would prefer, you can also type it into your cell as well by double clicking on it. And then you might remember that we want Excel to tell me how many people said 1. As you can enter that, and it will give me a response of 14. Now I could copy and paste this into no, but you want to be careful if you do that because right now we do not have absolute references for these cells. And so let's say that I'm not going to do that because then that will create extra work for me. So I'm just going to make sure that Excel knows. So I'm hitting F4 on my PC to make that into absolute references. And then you can copy this over if you would like. So copy and paste, or you can just drag. And now it has copied the same range, but we want to calculate no this time around. And so I'm going to replace the 1 with a 0, which represents no. And then we've got 107 people who said no. Now I may be interested in calculating not just the number of people, but the proportion. So this is n. This would be the proportion, let's say. And so I'm just labeling my data as I go. Now what you want to have though is actually the total n. So I might just write things down like this for myself. And you can either take a sum of these two. Another way to go though, just showing you a quick trick, is to actually do a formula called count, which would allow you to count the number of cells that contain numbers. So if you are confident that that is a good way to go, then you can also do D2 to D122 to get that 121. But you can see that if you've counted the valid number of cases for yes and no, then you can just add these two. Or you could do a sum function to get to 121. Now, one very important note. Why am I calculating the total n when we know that there are 121 rows? Now, the reason why is that there may be some missing data. And so it's not guaranteed that just because you see 121 rows of data that you're going to have that many cases. So in this instance, we happen to have complete data of 121 cases, but for some other variables, if there were any missing data, then you don't want to accidentally count missing cases as valid cases. And so it's a good idea to use either the count function or summing the number of cases that you know to have valid values like this in order to arrive at the total head count or total n. So make sure that you have a good way of calculating the total number of cases. Alright, so carrying on. So the percentage of people who said yes would be 14 divided by the total n. And so you can do that. And then you can copy over that formula if you would like, but make sure that it is referring to the correct cell. So if you did not do that, then of course it's going to complain because this is not correct. And so I'm just going to fix that by going in here and then adjusting to row 15, correct reference. And you could have also made that into an absolute cell reference as well. And then you've got 0.11 and 0.88. And if you would like, you can adjust that into a percentage by highlighting those cells and then letting Excel know that this is actually a percentage. And then it'll fix it for you. And I usually like to have maybe 1 decimal place. So I'm just going to make it into 10th place %. All right, very good. And so now I have data that I could graph. I could either graph the number of people or the percentages of people that responded yes or no. And I'm thinking that this might be easiest to represent using a pie chart. So let me do that. And what I can do is to highlight the data that I want to graph and then go to Insert and then go to the Charts area and select the 2D pie. And here is the pie chart. And so you can see that Excel has now graphed these numbers for me using a pie chart. And incidentally, CSUF color is pretty cool. You can also highlight the other data as well. So I'm just going to go back to the data and highlight the other cells and then try to insert the pie chart. And there is another pie chart that Excel created for me that are currently graphing those percentages. And so that's pretty cool. They look identical because, of course, the proportions are exactly the same between these two. But if you hover over, you can see that the values that this is representing are percentages, and then these are counts, even though Excel is already calculating the proportion. Now, you might notice that there's a fair amount of stuff that still needs to happen to the chart. And so what about chart title? How do I edit that? How do I label this chart so it's easier to understand? Thankfully, there's a legend here, but if I, what do I do if I need to adjust the legend and so on? And so let's talk about editing charts. Now, just as a quick tip, you might notice up here that new menus appeared in this area called Chart Design and Format. So we're going to go back to PowerPoint to discuss what they are. But if you click on somewhere else where there's regular data, any other cell that's outside of the chart, you will notice that those menus disappear. And so if you want to be able to edit your chart and format your chart, then you want to click on the chart to activate it, and then you will see those two menus here where you can work on the chart design and then formatting. And so let's go to PowerPoint to discuss further. See you there. All right, so once you activate your chart in Excel, you should see two tabs that are going to appear. This is a slightly different example I'm showing you on the PowerPoint, but Design and Format should appear. And so Design tab is where a lot of the action happens, and so you may add or edit different kinds of chart elements, for example, axis titles or labels and so on. And they're found right here. And then the quick layout next to it will give you some templates for charts with different kinds of labels already placed. Now, this may be incompatible with the way many APA-style figures will be drafted, but if you're using Excel for other purposes, then it might be worth taking a look. In APA style, because you will have a lot of labels and titles outside of the figure itself or the chart itself, I would say it may not be quite as useful. But that's my personal opinion, so give it a try if you're interested. And then there are chart styles, so Excel can give you different suggestions on coloring and so on. You can also switch row and column if you have two sets of data and want to reverse which way it goes, y-axis versus x-axis kind of thing. You can also select data for Excel to read in or change the chart type altogether. And so you can see that there's a lot of capabilities tucked into this Design tab. Now, you saw an example of this in Excel already, but if you have a categorical variable, and let's say that you're doing a pie chart or so on, if you include the labels along with the data, then Excel will oftentimes understand that and then read it in. So you saw an example of that already. But again, going to the Design portion of Chart Tools, you can select data and then tell Excel what to read in. So let me quickly hop on over and show you what that looks like. So welcome back to Excel. So let's say that I wanted to edit this particular chart. So I personally like to have pie charts with proportions, my personal preference. And so you will see the Design and Format up here. And we were talking about selecting data. Now let's take a look and see what that looks like. And so you can see that Excel is currently in dotted lines highlighting what it is reading in. And so the chart data range includes both the data itself and the labels, as you can see that there's column L and column J. And so this series part is where the data are. And so if you just go to edit, you can see what it is reading in. So series values, so this you can enter as a range is being read in as part of the series. And you can type in a series name if you would like. Or you could also, by clicking on this, tell Excel what it is if it's written into a cell. So tell Excel the location. Click on OK. And then here are the axis labels or category labels in this instance. As you can see that it is already highlighted, but if not, they can click on this little button and then Excel will ask you to go ahead and highlight it using your cursor mouse, and then you can just put enter and it will recognize that those are the labels for your data. Now you will want to make sure that whatever labels you use are placed in a location that corresponds with the data. And so make sure that the correspondence between your actual data and your labels are correct and not in any way altered or reversed, so that Excel can actually pair them together properly. And then you can hit OK. And currently you have noticed that the title became a % because it is Excel is recognizing that what I'm trying to graph is a percentage point. Now you can also just edit that and leave that. blank and then that will go away, or proportion of sample. You can type that in there and then it'll translate that into the chart title. But it's basically a label for what you're graphing is what it's asking for. And that's actually not the official way to adjust the title. You can actually just double click on the title to adjust it. Now you can go to design and add chart element to adjust the chart titles and labels and so on. And so let's say that you know that APA style figures do not require you to have a title right above your graph. And so I might click on none to just get rid of it and then to write out the title elsewhere. So now the title is gone, but you can add it back in by going to this area. Or you could go to data labels and add data labels. And so I personally like to have data labels within the graph, and so I might put it in center, but you can play around with different options. The beauty of Excel is that you can actually just kind of play around with all sorts of different options. So I'd encourage you to just go ahead and splash around, see what comes up and what looks good to you. This is what looks good to me, and so that's what I'm going to do. And if you go back to the chart, you can actually edit these and format these again, activate the labels, and then go to home where you have the familiar font menu to make adjustments. So maybe I would like, whoops, not this, the font to be white, just my personal preference, but not necessarily the best visible, depending on your opinions about having a dark background. And you can move your labels around, or you can click on that element and then increase the font size as well. Maybe you would like the legend to be not exactly at the bottom, in which case you can also go to design and then go to legend, and maybe you want to have it on the right, for example. And you can move it around as you wish by just clicking on it, and then once you get that four-way arrow, dragging it over. And so there you go. So you can go ahead and play around, see how Excel responds to your wishes and commands, and hope you have a lot of fun. So let's cover a few more details in PowerPoint and then wrap up for today. So in PowerPoint, you will have additional slides that give you some orientation about things that you could do if you had different kinds of charts. So for example, if you had a scatter plot, which has an X and Y axes, then you can also go to select data and adjust the series or the labels this way, going to that select data menu again. Once again, you can go to add chart element, but this time, depending on the chart type, you might see different options here. And so you can go ahead and check them out if you have such a chart. And just a little piece of advice, if you have more whatever options there is in that add chart element, I might encourage you to click on that to get more detailed options. So for example, if I go to more axis options, then I might have additional formatting and text options that you can adjust manually. And so you will be able to set range, for example, for your Y and X axes and so on, figure out what kind of major grid lines you might want to set and so on. And so I would encourage you to check it out. If you were not using APA style to create your chart, then again, quick layout will give you some additional options to consider as well. Now the forgotten tab, the format tab. Here is where you can also do some fancy artwork. And so you can go ahead and browse different areas of this format tool. And so you can select in this current selection area what part of the chart you want to edit. And then you can go ahead and insert shapes or shape styles, change the word art style, and so on. And so if you wanted to play around with formatting, you can do that as well by going to the Format tab. And so now you're all good to go to create your figures representing your demographic variables for your poster. And there are two demographic variables that you will want to provide charts for. And so you're all ready to go. Now you might be thinking that's a lot of menus and a lot of different things. Now my best encouragement to you is to just play around in Excel. And that's the best way to figure out what might work. Sometimes things will look better, sometimes worse, but you'll learn either way. And so go ahead and splash around in Excel. Hope you enjoy it. And also hope you have a great day to boot. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.